Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 6, 2015, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm honored tonight to stand here in the U.S. House of Representatives to call to the attention of my colleagues and my friends H.R. 5025, a bill that will bring some relief to much suffering in the Houston area in the state of Texas. But before I get into the bill itself, I think it appropriate to thank some people for what they have done to help us get to this point. I'm going to thank my colleague who will be speaking in just a moment, the Honorable Gene Green, who serves in the 29th Congressional District, which is right adjacent to the district that I serve. I want to thank my friend Gene Green because he is the original co-sponsor of this legislation. He was there to help shape it, and it means something to know that you've got a friend that you can work with to this extent. I want to thank my friend Congressman John Culberson. He is the first to make this legislation bipartisan. This is not a partisan issue. Flooding is not a partisan issue. The homes that are damaged, the lives that are lost, none of this is partisan. And I'm grateful to Congressman Culberson for signing onto this bill. I'd like to thank the 60-plus co-sponsors of the legislation who have said that they want to see what has been authorized materialize, such that in Houston, Texas, we can not only eliminate a lot of flooding, and we will, we can't eliminate all of it, but we can mitigate that which we cannot eliminate. And I thank Chairman McCall, Homeland Security. He published the letter for us, the members of the Texas delegation, to sign to send to the President of the United States of America, asking that Texas have certain areas within the state declared disaster areas because of the horrific flooding that took place on what we call Tax Day. And I thank the leadership for allowing us to have this time on the floor tonight on both sides. The leadership makes these things possible, and I'm grateful to all leadership for doing this. Finally, I want to thank President Barack Obama, because President Obama did, Mr. Speaker, declare certain areas in Texas disaster areas so that we might receive the help of FEMA and funds to help people recover and to restore their lives and continue with their lives. So tonight I will say more about some of these things that I've mentioned, but now I'm going to ask my colleague, who is the co-sponsor, lead co-sponsor of this, to have his commentary, because his district has suffered greatly, not just this time, but in the past, suffered greatly from these floods. I will not go into it. I will leave all to be said about this to him, but I think it appropriate that I acknowledge his great work in the Congress of the United States of America, not only on this issue, but on many other issues impacting people within his district and across the length and breadth of this great country. The Honorable Gene Green, I yield to you as much time as you may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague and neighbor and friend for setting the special order tonight for what we call the Tax Day floods in Houston, Harris County, Texas. Our district was hit by flooding, but not near as much as in Congressman Al Green's, because I was in his district that week, and also in the neighboring districts, Congressman Culberson, Congresswoman Lee, Congressman McCall, and Congressman Brady. But I was just looking at a memo. In our district, we have a hunting bio, which is part of the legislation, was overflowed, and the people who live in that area along Interstate 10 East, they've cleaned out their homes, the sheetrock and everything else, and it's literally a tragedy. On April 18th, the city of Houston and Harris County, Texas, was subjected to paralyzing flooding, which claimed the lives of 9 of our citizens and required the rescue of at least 1,200 others. Approximately 2,000 housing units were flooded, and we are currently working on the figure on where to house the folks who cannot return to their homes. This is the second major flooding disaster Houston has experienced in the last 6 months. The city is expecting additional rain even this weekend, tomorrow and Saturday. Residents of our congressional district, as well as other members' districts, have been severely affected, and we must do everything we can to stop the needless loss of life. The President has recognized the significance of the catastrophe and fulfilled a request for a disaster declaration. Now it's the job of Congress to help our constituents. That's why I worked closely with my neighbor and friend, colleague, Representative Al Green, to introduce the Tax Day Flood Supplemental Act, H.R. 5025. The legislation would provide $311 million to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the construction and, in most cases, completion of our bio and flood projects in the Houston-Harris County area. Flooding is not new to Houston, but we've learned how to control it. Our biosystems has saved countless lives and millions of dollars in damage since the creation of them. Unfortunately, due to the consistent budget pressure, the Army Corps of Engineers cannot adequately fund these projects. This bill would ensure that our federal, state, local authorities have the resources necessary to expedite these flood control projects we know protect people and property. My colleagues and I have requested the Director of FEMA and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to tour our districts and see the damage firsthand, and I renew that request again today. The support in the community is overwhelming. The Greater Houston Partnership, our Chamber of Commerce, supports this legislation, and they estimate that the total loss is about $1.9 billion. And it's also supported by our local. In Harris County, we created a flood control district that partners with the Corps of Engineers. Our Harris County Flood Control District also supports this legislation. Additionally, I want to make sure that the folks on the ground have the information they need to get back in their homes. FEMA has opened disaster centers in our community, but if you're not near one of those centers, you can apply to FEMA by phone. Call 1-800-621-3362. That's 1-800-621-FEMA. 1-800-621-3362. FEMA can offer two types of assistance: housing assistance, temporary housing, money to help repair or replace your primary residence. Non-housing needs includes medical, dental, funeral costs, clothing, household items, tools, home fuel, disaster-related moving and storage, replacement of disaster-damaged vehicles. After 24 hours, FEMA will follow up with you. It's important in our district to know that if your Spanish-speaking households have children or they're U.S. citizens or legal residents, FEMA can help you if there's a legal resident or a citizen living in that home. It's important, Ms. Speaker, that we help victims in our neighborhoods so we can get back on top and and help them. And I urge our body, this House, to pass the emergency funding legislation and do so as quickly as we can. And again, I want to thank my colleague and friend. I was impressed that day when we were in your district in Westbury, the flooding and the outpouring of people. I've seen it in our district where people will literally move everything from their house. They have to throw it away. It's out on the curb. And City of Houston is cleaning it up as fast as they can, but we need to get these people back into their homes. But this bill that we have will make sure their homes are not flooded again, because that way we don't need to have these repetitive floods like we've had in the last few years. And again, I want to thank my colleague for this special order tonight, but more importantly, I want to thank you for your leadership on this piece of legislation, and I'm proud to be your co-sponsor. And
thank you. Thank you very much, and I greatly appreciate all that you have done to help us, especially coming into my district and being there with the mayor, if you'll recall, who was there. We had a county commissioner in attendance, County Commissioner Gene Locke, Mayor Sylvester Turner, and persons from that neighborhood. This was not your district, but the people were people that you cared about, and they are grateful, as am I, for your coming in and visiting with us.
if you'll yield to me, it also had the press conference, and everybody was confused. We also have your city council member, Larry Green. So they had Congressman Al Green, Congressman Eugene Green, and City Councilman Larry Green. So they, but they can call all of us, and we'll help them. So
absolutely. In Houston, Green is a good name if you want to become a member of the political order. Again, I thank my colleague. Let me elaborate for just a moment on the letter from the Houston Partnership, because a good many people are not aware that this is another way for us to say Chamber of Commerce in Texas. We've gone beyond a simple Chamber of Commerce. We call ours a partnership because it's an effort among the many to make sure that commerce excels, but also to make sure that people have great opportunities. Houston is a city of opportunity. And I want to thank the partnership for the letter that has been sent to us supporting H.R. 5025. But now let's be a little bit more specific. I want to thank Mr. Jamie Roots. He is the chairperson of the partnership. He and I have been talking, and he has been working with me and with my colleagues to try to make sure that we have an opportunity to get our message out to the masses. He has done what he can to help us with this messaging, a message that includes the position of the Houston Partnership, I must add. Also, Mr. Bob Harvey, who is the president and CEO of the partnership. We made a call to them one morning asking if they could get a letter to us indicating their support. And that afternoon, we had the letter in hand, the letter that I hold in my hand currently. And that letter is, without question, a solid indication of support for this project. The last paragraph of it reads, "We want to make sure that we do all that we can to help you and your staff as you consider every potential opportunity for federal support. Please do not hesitate to call." And they give names and numbers. They are committed to doing what they can to not only help with this legislation, but to help people in their recoveries and to prevent this from happening again. The Harris County Flood Control District, Mr. Michael Talbert, sent the letter, the executive director, and in his letter he speaks of how this can benefit the Houston area to the amount of about $2.4 billion. He goes on to talk about the jobs that can be created, 6,220 created if we can get this legislation done, if we can get this money into Houston. And I must add this money is money that we will get eventually into Houston. This is not money that we won't ever get. These projects have been authorized. They're already in progress. It's just that we're getting the money in a piecemeal fashion, and we need a wholesale representation of this emolument for Houston, such that we can get on with these projects, such that we can prevent future damages, such that we can save lives. What we cannot eliminate, we can mitigate in terms of damages. So I'm honored that the Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers has these projects that they're working on, and I'm especially honored that the Flood Control District has let us know that they are absolutely in support of what we're trying to accomplish with H.R. 5025. Now, having said all of these things and making it clear that this is money that has to be matched, that this is money that we will eventually acquire, I think it appropriate for me to say this. This is about more than money. It's about more than things, inanimate objects. This is about more than homes and personal property, cars, and all of the things that we call creature comforts. It's about more than these things. It's about people. This legislation really is about human beings. It's about human beings who are in a recovery phase right now, many of them recovering from the Tax Day flood, some still recovering from the Memorial Day flood, which took place last Memorial Day. So it's about these people. But not only these people, it's about people who lost their lives, Mr. Speaker, in this flood. My colleague mentioned that there were nine persons that we know of lost their lives. And wouldn't it be a shame to remember the flood? Remember the damages that were imposed upon the homes and the cars and the furniture. Remember the damages, but not remember the people who lost their lives. So tonight, I want to take just a moment and on behalf of my colleague and many others in this House, and just recognize, memorialize the lives that were lost in this horrific flood, a tragedy that, quite frankly, could have been mitigated if we had all of these projects to completion. Let's just remember these persons and not forget them. So with a degree of solemnity, I would like to just call their names and say a little bit about each of the nine. The first, Airman Antonio Franco. He was 66 years of age, Mr. Speaker. He was a retired H-E-B produce manager. H-E-B is one of our food stores. He also worked as a part-time contract limousine driver. This was a man who had children, 3 children and 4 grandchildren. The circumstances of his death are that he died after an encounter with high water. Something we'll see consistently as I go through this. But he lost his life in Houston, Texas, in a flood. I'd like to mention Miss Claudia. First name is Melgar. Claudia Melgar. She lost her life, 25 years of age. She was a college student. She died in an encounter with high water. Now, there are those who would say that you can avoid an encounter with high water. I believe that in many circumstances you can. But in Houston, Texas, we have what are known as flash floods, floods that occur in a flash. And there are many times when you can be caught in a circumstance such that you cannot extricate yourself. And because of this, the waters will envelop you, and you will find yourself in a position such that you cannot even leave the car that you're in because of the way the electronics can malfunction. And if you don't have some device, some tool to break windows, to move yourself through some passageway other than that door, you will find yourself in harm's way and you can lose your life. This has happened to many people. It happened to Claudia. I'd also like to mention Pedro Rascon Morales, 61 years of age. He was a big rig driver, a father and a grandfather. He died in the cab of his 18-wheeler while trapped in a flooded roadway in Houston, Texas. All of these persons are in and around the Houston area. They all lost their lives in water due to flooding with the tax day floods, as we call them. And these are lives that we can never forget. I think that we should remember the damages that were caused to property, the destruction, but we shouldn't forget the lives that were lost, because there are families that are grieving to this day because they lost people that they loved. These were the daughters and sons of somebody, and we should never forget that they lived and that they lost their lives. Some, I might add, in a needless circumstance. This is my opinion, because of our not fulfilling our obligation to fund what has been authorized. Next, we have Charles Edward Odom, 56 years of age, 7th grade social studies teacher, married, with 2 children. Circumstances of his death: died after encountering high water. And then there was Terry White Rodriguez, 41 years of age, a wife, mother of 3. Circumstances of death: died in her vehicle after an encounter with high water. An encounter with high water in Houston, Texas. An unfortunate circumstance. We should not forget that lives were lost. I know that it's going to be easy for many of us to go on with our lives. This will be put behind us. We have a moment when we focus on these things. But life is such that there are so many other things that we encounter that our focus is lost, or that we focus on something else that is important. So I don't begrudge anybody who has to focus on other things. I just believe that I have a duty, an obligation, and a responsibility to make sure that we don't forget these lives that were lost. There will be others, but we don't want to forget these. There have been others, but we won't forget these. We won't forget Sunita Singh, 49, an electrical engineer, a wife and a mother of 2 children, drowned in her car after an encounter with high water. Let's not forget Sharish Kumar Talori, 49, husband, father of 2 young children, ages 6 and 8, drowned in his car after he was trapped by high water. We shouldn't forget, and we should commemorate the life of Dharamina Uppal. And this is an unfortunate circumstance wherein we have the age of the person undisclosed, the circumstances of the death undisclosed, in the sense that we don't know personal information about this person who lost his life, or her. I'm assuming that from the name it was a female, but this person died and was found deceased in his car, a male, deceased in his car, which appears to have been submerged. It was a male. The name is important. The identity is not known completely because we don't know the age and we don't have personal information. And then there's a woman with an undisclosed name, with not personal information available to us at this time, who drowned after an encounter with high water. All of these unfortunate circumstances involve people. And I want to make sure tonight that while we will talk about the billions of dollars in damages, and there were billions of dollars in damages, billions of dollars. It is estimated that as high as $8 billion in damages when you combine the Memorial Day flood with the Tax Day flood, as much as $8 billion. That $8 billion, by the way, is 25 times the $311 million that we might use to take preventive action. So these monies will not go to help people get new homes. These monies won't go to help people get personal items that have been destroyed. All of these monies will go to projects that have been authorized, projects that, if completed, can possibly prevent the loss of future lives, and projects that, if they had been completed, may have prevented the loss of some of these lives. So I take it as my personal responsibility to call this to the attention of this House and to ask my colleagues to please consider H.R. 5025. The President has declared the area that I'm speaking of as a disaster area. FEMA is there. This is an opportunity for us to act. We've done it before, and we should do it now. And I want to assure my colleagues that when there is a disaster of this magnitude, you can count on our good offices being with you to help you through your time of need. We understand that we should be there for people. This is what we have done in the past, whether it was Sandy, hurricanes, whether it's tornadic activities, whether it's fires or hurricanes along the Gulf Coast. We want to be there for our people. This is our country. And a country is more than bricks and buildings and skyscrapers and military. It's people who live ordinary lives, who expect that they would have the opportunity to fulfill their dreams, to go to work and come home safely and not find themselves in harm's way by virtue of waters that are not expected, flood waters that can come in a flash and take them away. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this time. I thank my colleagues who have signed on to this piece of legislation. And I want to again thank the President of the United States, the Honorable Barack Obama, for making his desires known by declaring certain areas in Texas a disaster area. I thank the governor of the state, by the way, Mr. Speaker, because he acted quickly, swiftly, and promptly to make the request of the President. I've mentioned Mr. McCall. Thank you again for your actions in circulating the letter so that all of the members of the Texas delegation could be on it, requesting that certain areas in Texas receive this attention from the President. And finally, I know that these are difficult times for us across the nation and across the world. There are many things that are happening that are challenging for us. But among these things, let us not forget that there were people who lost their lives in Houston, Texas. And let us not forget that these floods occur with a degree of regularity such that it is predictable that it will happen again. We can prognosticate now that this will happen again. And if it does, I will find myself back here as a reminder that there are things that we could have done, should have done, and hopefully will do to eliminate much of the flooding and mitigate that which we cannot eliminate. I'm grateful, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields.